You walk into someone's house and there's a cat, not a dog that runs to greet you, tail wagging, desperate for your attention. A cat, sitting on the back of the couch, watching you with those slow blinking eyes, deciding whether you're worth acknowledging. And while everyone else is trying to pet it, calling to it, making those embarrassing kissing noises, you just sit down. You don't look directly at it. You don't reach for it. You simply exist in the same space. And 5 minutes later, the cat walks over and chooses you. If you're someone who loves cats, who understands them in a way that confuses dog people, who finds their independence beautiful instead of insulting, this isn't just about preference. This is about psychology. Because the type of person who loves cats isn't random. And what draws you to them says more about how you see the world than you might realize. Let me paint you a picture of something you've probably lived. Someone asks you, "Are you a cat person or a dog person?" And you say cat. And immediately they have opinions. "Oh, so you're cold. You must not like affection. Cats are so mean. Don't you want something that actually loves you back?" And you smile, because you know something they don't. Cats do love. They just don't perform it. They don't beg for it. They don't collapse into grateful puddles every time you walk through the door like you've returned from war. Their love is quiet, intentional, earned. And if you love cats, that probably resonates with how you experience love yourself. Psychology shows that people who prefer cats tend to score higher in introversion, openness to experience, and something researchers call need for autonomy. Translation: you don't need constant validation to feel secure. You're comfortable with independence, both yours and others, and you appreciate relationships that don't require constant maintenance to prove they're real. Think about it. A dog's love is loud, immediate, and unconditional. The moment you meet a dog, it loves you, completely, without question. And for some people, that feels amazing. It's pure, uncomplicated, enthusiastic. But for others, it feels overwhelming, almost suffocating, because there's no space in that dynamic, no room to breathe, no mystery, no choice. A cat, on the other hand, makes you work for it. Not in a manipulative way, but in a way that says, "I have boundaries, I have preferences, I will come to you when I'm ready." And when they finally do, when that cat curls up on your lap after days of ignoring you, it means something. Because it wasn't automatic, it was chosen. And if you're someone who loves cats, you probably value that. You understand that love doesn't have to be loud to be real, that affection doesn't need to be constant to be genuine, that independence isn't rejection, it's respect. But there's something deeper here, something that goes back further than you think. Research in developmental psychology shows that people who prefer cats often had childhoods where emotional space was valuable. Maybe you grew up in a chaotic household where everyone was always in your business. Maybe you had parents who demanded constant emotional labor, constant performance, constant proof that you loved them. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you grew up emotionally neglected, and you learned early that needing too much from people was dangerous. That dependency led to disappointment, that the safest way to connect was to stay just slightly out of reach. Either way, you learn that relationships work best when there's room to retreat, when love doesn't require you to be on all the time. When you can exist in the same space as someone without constant interaction, and that silence feels comfortable instead of awkward. Psychologists call this secure independence. You're not afraid of closeness, but you don't need it to feel whole. You can be alone without being lonely. You can love someone without needing to consume them or be consumed by them. And that's exactly what a cat offers. A cat will sit in the same room as you, doing its own thing, completely content. It doesn't need you to entertain it. It doesn't need you to prove you care. It just needs to know you're there. And that quiet companionship, that parallel existence, feels more intimate to you than any amount of enthusiastic tail wagging ever could. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Studies show that cat people tend to be more nonconformist. They're less likely to follow social norms just because everyone else does. They're more comfortable being misunderstood. They don't need the crowd to validate their choices. Sound familiar? Loving cats in a world that worships dogs is a tiny act of rebellion because society tells us that love should look a certain way: loud, obvious, constantly reassuring, that if someone doesn't greet you with excitement every single time, they must not care. But you know that's not true. You know that the deepest connections are often the quietest, that real intimacy doesn't need performance, that someone can love you deeply while still maintaining their own identity, their own space, their own mysterious inner world. And you're okay with that. In fact, you prefer it. Because if you love cats, you probably don't want to be someone's whole world. You don't want to be needed in that desperate, clinging way. You want to be chosen, appreciated, respected, but not worshipped. You want a relationship where both people, or in this case, both beings, remain whole. Where connection doesn't mean merging, where love doesn't mean losing yourself. Let me tell you what cat people understand that most people don't. Mystery is not a threat, it's a gift. When a dog loves you, you know exactly what you're getting. There's no question, no doubt. It's all right there on the surface, obvious and uncomplicated. But a cat keeps you guessing. You never fully know what they're thinking. They have their own internal world that you're only occasionally invited into, and instead of finding that frustrating, you find it fascinating because you understand that you don't need to know everything about someone to love them, that there's beauty in the unknown, that allowing someone to remain partially mysterious is a form of respect. And this probably extends to how you approach relationships with humans, too. You're not the person who needs to know where your partner is every second of the day. You don't need constant texts, constant updates, constant proof of their devotion. You trust that they're thinking about you even when they're not talking to you. You understand that space doesn't equal absence, and when people accuse you of being distant or cold, what they're really saying is, I don't understand how you can love without clinging, but you do, because you've learned from the masters, creatures who perfected the art of loving without losing themselves thousands of years ago. Here's something else that separates cat people from dog people: intelligence preference. And I don't mean cat people are smarter. I mean they're attracted to intelligence in others. Cats are smart, unnervingly smart. They problem solve, they manipulate, they observe you, learn your patterns, and use that information to get what they want. They're tiny scientists conducting experiments on your behavior, and if you love cats, you probably find that impressive instead of annoying. You appreciate beings who think for themselves, who don't just follow commands blindly, who have their own agenda and aren't afraid to pursue it. This is why cat people often get frustrated with obedience culture. The idea that love means compliance, that a good relationship is one where someone does exactly what you tell them to, feels fundamentally wrong to you. You don't want a pet that obeys. You want a companion who chooses. And the fact that your cat could knock that glass off the table but decides not to, that feels more meaningful than a dog sitting because you commanded it to. Because the cat has agency, and you respect that. Now let's talk about the stereotype that needs to die: the idea that cat people are antisocial, lonely, or can't form human connections. That's not true, and the research backs this up. What is true is that cat people tend to be more selective about their social interactions. They prefer depth over breadth, a few close friendships over a large social circle, quality over quantity. Sound like anyone you know, you're not antisocial, you're selectively social. You don't hate people, you just hate performing for people. You hate small talk. You hate forced enthusiasm. You hate relationships that require constant maintenance just to prove they still exist. You want friendships like a cat's affection, real but not needy, present but not suffocating, there when it matters, absent when it doesn't, and in a world that equates extroversion with health, that equates constant socializing with success, choosing the quieter path feels rebellious, but it's not wrong. It's just different. Here's the final thing I want you to understand. If you love cats, you're not cold. You're not broken. You're not afraid of love. You just understand that love doesn't have to scream to be real. You've learned that the most powerful connections are often the ones that allow space, that respect boundaries, that don't demand constant proof. You've learned that someone can sit in silence beside you and love you more deeply than someone who never stops talking. You've learned that independence isn't the opposite of intimacy, it's the foundation of it. And every cat you've ever loved has taught you that lesson in 1,000 small ways. In the slow blink that says, I trust you. In the head bump that means, you're mine. In the way they choose your lap over everyone else's, not because they need you, but because in that moment, they want you. And that wanting, that conscious choice, means everything. So the next time someone asks if you're a cat person, and they say it like it's a character flaw, like it means you're incapable of real connection, just smile. Because you know something they don't. You know that the deepest love doesn't beg, it chooses, and it keeps choosing, quietly, consistently, without needing applause. You know that independence and intimacy aren't opposites, they're partners. And you know that the cat curled up on your chest right now, purring so quietly only you can feel it, loves you more intentionally than any creature that's ever loved anyone, not despite the space you give them, because of it.